Hey everybody, welcome back to Out Reptiles. My name is Garrett Hartle, and in this week's video, we're going to do a deep dive into the goat line. I thought that this bloodline kind of deserved its own whole video because it's something that hasn't really been done before. You see, we've been selectively breeding using super dwarfs and crossing them into mainland stuff to get different mutations, color mutations, pattern mutations in reticulated pythons, smaller down in size. But this is the first time I can think of where somebody intentionally took a locality and specifically shrunk it down into super dwarfs. So this week, I just wanted to dive in and tell you all about this bloodline. And I got a few of my friends who ended up with some of these animals to chime in as well, just to kind of let you know what it's like living with the greatest of all time. So I've kind of always had Sulawesi's. They're not a dwarf or super dwarf by any means, but a mainland locality that I've always really enjoyed for their color, their contrast, the vibrance. They're considered by many people who are reticulated python enthusiasts to probably be one of the most engaging and beautiful of all the reticulated python localities. But they tend to get kind of huge. So the story of this bloodline actually goes back to a time when my friend Brian Cusco came over for a visit, and I'm trying to show him all our cool super dwarf stuff, and he stumbled upon one of the young male Sulawesi's and said, that's the snake for me.
Well, let's just make one thing clear. It's not my perspective. This is the facts of what actually happened. I won't say solely responsible for it because I'm not, but it did come out of my brain in just a want form. I didn't know it was actually going to happen. I wasn't like, hey, you know what? We should do this. I got an idea for you for a project, Garrett. No, it wasn't like that. I was just hanging out at the house and holding this snake thinking like, man, that's super cool. And I told him, if you ever get this thing turned into a super dwarf, that'll be the first super dwarf I get from Out Reptiles. And I didn't know that he was going to actually make it happen.
So once Brian had kind of proposed this idea, it sort of gnawed on me for a while. I had just been maintaining the pure Sulawesi localities because they are kind of uncommonly bred in the United States. And the bloodline we had micro locality specific information. That is, they were from the Bantaeng region or Bantaeng region of Sulawesi. So they were really kind of unique. But the more that I sat around and thought about it, I thought, this would actually be a really cool experimental breeding, kind of a fun way for me to test a lot of the theories that we had on what makes good selective breeding. The main thing I wanted to do was try to get the traits that we wanted in the Sulawesi shrunken down to a smaller size.
When he sent me the snake years later, I didn't know what he was sending me. I was just like, oh, he's sending me a super dwarf or something. And he sent the first of the goat line to me, and I was like, oh wow, we did it.
There's a note. It says, Brian, years ago when you held my Bantaeng male, you said if I made that locality in super dwarf, it would be your first from me. So I made this guy for you. Thanks, Garrett. What a guy. What a guy. What a friend. Who just makes a snake just for their friend?
I was actually interested since I heard about the first breeding that Garrett attempted. I think that was the end of 2019. But I think the female reabsorbed. Tried it again in 2020. And I wasn't sure if he was going to let any of them go or what was going on. So I was just kind of like following online about it. And then on Patreon, he had mentioned a few things about the goat line. And then I thought, So I was reading up as much as I could about it. I even knew like their expected hatch date. So I was just excited to see them.
So one of the things that I've learned over the different clutches that I've had with the super dwarfs is that you have much different results using different sized females. That is, if you use really small females and mainland males, you can actually get really small results out of those selective breedings. So with that in mind, I wanted to pick the perfect female. Now, Karampas are generally regarded as the smallest locality of reticulated pythons in the world, but they're also very rare, and I would be unwilling, as cool as this goat line is, to sacrifice a pure locality breeding from a female of those to get this done. However, I did have a Carrampa Calatoa cross female that was beautiful, sweet, had a ton of those Carrampa traits, especially the really heavy pattern. See, Carrampas have almost twice as many saddles as a Sulawesi does, or twice as much pattern as a Sulawesi does on their animals. So she had that, and then she also had that very calm, very sweet, very curious demeanor, whereas most Sulawesis tend to be a little bit more spastic, especially when they're young. And I mean, I've never minded if an animal was a little defensive as a baby, but Sulawesis have the tendency to like empty their bowels and musk all over you, as opposed to kind of coil up, warn you, maybe take a bite at you if you don't leave them alone. And I don't know about you, but obviously, you know, I would rather get bitten by a baby retic than hosed down every time I pulled them out. So from mom's side, what I wanted to bring was a heavy amount of pattern, the sweet, calm demeanor, and then the non-pee all over you attitude. From dad's side, I wanted to basically bring in all of the looks that the Sulawesi has, which are so completely opposite of the Super Dwarfs. That is like chunky, big cheeks, you know, thick, kind of bulldog heads, really chubby cheeks, a very vibrant yellow head, and then thick, sweeping black lines. The idea is if we could take all the good looks of a Sulawesi and a little bit of that head structure as well and breed it into the Super Dwarf, we could potentially get the small size and twice as much of the good looks on one snake that we already enjoy in the Sulawesi.
So when I went to Retic Fest last year in July, and we were talking about them, and Kim said there was 2 males left. So I was like, of course I want one. Yeah. So that's how I got one.
The little that I have learned about Super Dwarf breeding, just through osmosis, being around Garrett and watching Richard Reptile videos, is that the way to do it ideally is to take a male of what you want with genetically for the color, pattern, locality. This is the first time I guess you're actually trying to breed a certain locality into Super Dwarf, right? Versus trying to get morphs into Super Dwarf. So you take the male that you want from that and get it to the smallest Super Dwarf female that you possibly can in order to keep them small. And I mean, I don't know how the other ones have turned out so far, but I can tell you mine is definitely still tiny.
Love it. Amazing, adorable, great personality, very friendly, very cute. The color is really starting to come in now that she's getting a little bigger, but she's still not getting that much bigger. Like, she's very tiny. She eats small adult mice, and she's gonna be a year old this spring. So far, everything has panned out the way that I think Garrett was hoping it would pan out, and I'm just excited to kind of keep following along and see where she goes, how she grows, what she looks like, and you know, if it all comes to fruition like the dream is.
He's one of the most amazing snakes that I have. Very personable, very not scared of anything. Also not mean at all. You know, he always wants to come out and explore, and he's the snake I can give to somebody that doesn't like snakes, and he will just crawl up their arm and, you know, tongue flick, and, you know, he's just a perfect snake for that. And now he's really starting to color up, so he's really getting that Bantang kind of look, but in a Super Dwarf size. I actually got a pure Super Dwarf male from Garrett last year too, and they're about the same size now. And so it's kind of interesting to see that he's basically the size of what my pure is. So, but I mean, he's just a joy to keep. He's just awesome. And you know, my husband always jokes that he's my favorite because I'm always like, you got to come in and see what he's doing. And so he's just a great animal.
So now that all these animals are about a year old and they're just starting to mature into that adult kind of yellow head coloration, we can really see the effect on the bloodline that the Sulawesi has. And also now that they're about a year old and spanning across a bunch of different people, keeping them in all different ways, we've all had very similar results. This is not something where, because it's a first-time cross, some of the babies have stayed almost mainland size, some almost Super Dwarf size, and everything in between, but rather true to all the theories that already exist with F1 hybrids of of any species of living things. These ones have been much more consistent across the board, and I'm very happy to see that they're taking the size attributes from the mom and yet developing into the beautiful animals that the Sulawesis are from their dad's side. So aside from making one-time kind of cool pets, I think the future of the goat line, I mean, we can see where it goes. Really, I'm just kind of enjoying life with these unique reticulated pythons. But I guess the idea is probably with our females to take some of that, since they already have the good small size and a lot of the cool looks from dad, and maybe use some of our morph cross males to sprinkle some of that Sulawesi good looks into our small bloodlines of morph reticulated pythons and see how that turn out. But I gotta say, I mean, Brian really was right in his concept that these have turned into some very, very cool snakes. So I would also be super interested to make an F2 cross of goat line animals. That's pulling it ahead one more generation with a little bit more variety in the clutches, and see there if I can get ones that have even more of the Sulawesi looks and head structure and coloration with even more of the super dwarf size.
What do you like the most about the goat line?
That it was created for me specifically. I mean, how do you not like something like that? How do you not like if a friend of yours decides, oh, you know, Brian really wants something like, well, ask for this, so I'm gonna give it, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna make it happen. I mean, that's my favorite thing about it right off the bat. It was personalized for me.